Welcome to Satsang.
Could you please talk about the topic, openness counts for everything?
Okay, so it's quite foreign for human beings to be completely open. Most human beings pretend to be open while actually being defended and closed. All defense systems are closures. But really, in the game of higher consciousness, in the way of the heart, what's required is openness. And so from my perspective, openness counts for everything. And in itself, the practice of being open is the way to higher consciousness, is the way to find love, and is the way to superconsciousness. But most people don't even realize that they're actually closed, that they're actually defended. Most people have had experience with holding a young baby, and you can feel how open that baby is, how vulnerable that baby is, how it hasn't developed its defense systems yet. Well, as an adult, we can be that vulnerable. We can be that open. And that's what will support us knowing love, perceiving love. That's what will support us in higher consciousness. And that's what will support us in superconsciousness. Openness really does count for everything. But to get to that stage where you're that open from a position of being closed is quite difficult. It's not easy. Every endeavour needs to be to practice openness. And if we want to see how closed we are, all we've got to do is get into a disagreement with life, whether that's another person or a situation or an ideology even. And do you stay open while you're in disagreement, or do you close? If you close, you've got defense systems operating. And those defense systems are actually in the way. They're in the way of perceiving love, higher consciousness, superconsciousness. But because we can see them, we can do something about them. We can start to remove them. If you ever run into someone who's awake, you'll find that they're wide open. They have to be. But they would have been like that before awakening as well. That wouldn't have been something that happened after awakening. It would have been something that happened before awakening. Because a mind that can stay wide open, even with the disagreements of the world, is a mind that can support enlightenment. And so it's up to you how you create your reality. We have defenses to protect ourselves from feeling things. But those very defenses that protect us from feeling things also stop us from feeling love, because they create a barrier between us and love. They all stop us from going to higher consciousness, because any contraction keeps us locked in lower consciousness. So I got into openness when I was about 19, because I realized then that openness was a very important quality to have to be successful in the material world. People trust openness, they don't trust closedness. And in the beginning, I guess there was a lot of fraudulent behaviour on my behalf, pretending to be open instead of being genuinely open. But really, we actually have to be genuinely open. And that means taking down our defences and not putting them up again. Staying open. Walking through the world in a way where we accept life as it is rather than where we resist life as it is. This is the way of the heart. This is also the way to high consciousness. And so you could say it's a pathway, if you like, the path of least resistance, the path of non-resistance. But it demands discipline. And the reason it demands discipline is because at a very primal level, we are programmed to survive. And that means we are programmed to protect ourselves. And all of the defense systems that stop us from feeling anything are there to protect us. So for someone to actually be wide open, they have gone against nature. It is not natural. That's why it is not natural for someone to wake up, or someone to actually have higher consciousness, or for that matter, someone to be perceiving love all the time. Because if we run true to our nature, our primal imperatives, we will be closed. We will defend ourselves. We will protect ourselves from feeling things that are painful, and in so doing, survive. So someone who's woken up has gone against nature. They have defeated their own mind in unconditional surrender. And this is brilliant when you look at it. It's brilliant. But it takes a fair bit of effort. It is not easy. And anybody that says it's easy either hasn't done it or they have an investment in lying. And I don't know why. So it's up to you. What are you going to do with yourself? Where are you going to take all this? You can sit around and stay defended and stay closed and think that somehow you're raising your consciousness levels by listening to gurus or reading books on the subject. But truthfully, it's not going to work, not while you remain closed. Your openness is what's going to facilitate your higher consciousness, which is, it's going to facilitate your perception of love. It's going to facilitate enlightenment. And that means that you actually have to be willing to be uncomfortable. Because without our defense systems, the world doesn't change. It still hits us. It still hurts. But there has to be a willingness to be open, a willingness to be vulnerable, a willingness to walk through the world with our heart on our sleeve instead of behind some cage in our chest. So it takes courage. And this is why every time I sign off from satsang, I say goodbye brave hearts. Because for people to truly be seekers, they have to be brave. Your courage is required to walk through the world in a vulnerable, open way. To be wide open, like a newborn baby. And only you can produce that. Nobody else can do that. Are there any questions? Any statements? Any challenges to this teaching here today?
The first question is, how can I tell when I'm truly being open as opposed to just pretending to be open?
Well, you probably can't because you're probably fooling yourself that you are open. The mind is great at telling itself lies. Openness is, you have to get a ground level of openness. Now, quite often people can be open when they're by themselves. Maybe after they've had a few drinks or something like that. And they can feel that level of openness, that level of non-contraction to the world. So that's a ground level. Now they can measure their openness from that point. Are they that open all the time, or are they above that somewhere in closure? And so I called that point 0. And I played this game that I called 0. And it was any time I found myself contracted or in resistance or not open above 0, I wanted to know why. And I wanted to get back to 0. And I called it the game of 0, and I played it for many, many years. So if I was in meetings or I was in discussions or whatever, and I found myself not at 0, my interest was more in why I'm not at 0 than what was being said. Openness became more important to me than anything else because I recognized it for what it is, the pathway to love, the pathway to higher consciousness. And so you find your 0, where you're wide open as you can possibly be. Usually this will be when you're by yourself. And then from that point, you have a measurement. from that point, you can see, aha, I'm not at zero. How can I get back to zero? For me, it meant undoing a lot of belief systems that contracted me against life, which took me to resistance and contraction. And so I removed those belief systems so I could stay at zero, because I recognized that openness is the best way to live in this world. Closure creates separation, cuts you off from your heart, keeps you in lower consciousness. Openness is best.
What do we need to do to overcome fear to stay open while under fire?
Breathe out. Fear is a projected dream. It's not a reality. Fear is about later, always about later. It's a projection into the future that something awful is going to happen. And so we use the breath to breathe out. And on that outward breath, you let yourself die to whatever. Just let yourself die on the outward breath. Let everything go on the outward breath. And open up. You'll quite often be able to see what it is that you're defending against. Because fear is a defense system. It's protection. It's a primal survival mechanism, our main one. Anything unknown presents itself, fear comes up, protects us from it. And of course, as such, it's an obstacle to higher consciousness. It's an obstacle to love. It's an obstacle to superconsciousness. Yet it's natural in itself. Fear is our main survival mechanism. But we can step through it. We can breathe out and let go. And we can practice breathing out and letting go every time fear presents itself, if we want to, and get back to that ground level of zero.
A viewer asks, is being triggered a closure or simply pain?
So you can get triggered but not react. Something can touch but not react. Say someone says something and it hurts, but there's no reaction. So you've been triggered, but there's no reaction. And that's because you're conscious enough not to react. In lower consciousness, there's probably nothing but reactions. But in higher consciousness, there's a choice to react or respond, and the response might be to do nothing. And so higher consciousness can keep us away from suffering to a large degree, because instead of reacting and going into resistance, we remain open, we respond with openness. Because all forms of resistance are suffering, and most reactions are resistance, and so there's suffering. So as you go up in consciousness levels, you stop suffering, because you're not creating it for yourself, you're not resisting life. People think suffering is caused by something outside of them. No, you cause the suffering because of your resistance. And as you become more conscious, you don't do that. You just don't. It's up to you. This game of zero that I'm talking about shows you where all of your obstacles are, how you react, the belief systems that support those reactions, the things that need to be undone. It's up to you to have a look, and it's up to you to undo them.
Nadine asks, if someone is raging and yelling at me, I find it really hard to stay open. My instinct is to move away. Can I stay open while moving away, or is the moving away closure in itself?
It is closure. It's a defense system. You're moving away from something that's uncomfortable. It is a form of closure. I won't say I used people's anger, but I found that when people were angry with me or angry around me, instead of moving away, I actually moved closer to remain open while under fire. Because I like to see if I could stay open while under fire. What I noticed when I stayed open under fire is the anger that was being directed, or even if it was just in the room because someone was angry, I found that it did come into my own system. And when anger comes into your system, it turns around inside your system and wants to come out in the form of aggression of some kind, more anger possibly. And so I got to watch this energy of anger come into me, turn around, want to come back out again. And instead of allowing it to come back out again, I just witnessed it, and eventually it dissipated. But I found that angry people were great teachers for me because they showed me where I was defended. They showed me where I was closed. They showed me the things I needed to see about me. I learnt to stay at zero in the presence of people who are angry directing it towards me. And at zero, you're cool. So you're not inciting the other. It's a great way to be, but it takes practice because it's not natural. Our natural instinct around anger, because anger can be dangerous, is to close. Moving away, of course, is closure.
Do you have to have a conscious willingness to be hurt to be able to stay open?
Yes.
One of the things that strikes me when I hear about your life is how you were with fear, and how it didn't stop you from having a very adventurous life. What has been your attitude towards fear?
I was in boarding school in the younger part of my life, and a Christian Brothers boarding school, and I was not a reasonable child. I was an uncontrollable child. So a lot of force was brought to bear to try to bring me into line. And it failed because I recognized quite clearly that they used the fear of punishment, in this case strapping and caning, to control students, to control people. And I just refused to be controlled by fear. They would have you stand outside the headmaster's office for an hour, knowing for that hour you would know that you were going to get beaten. And that was the whole part of the punishment. It wasn't just the 6 on the hand or the 6 on the bottom that you got that was the punishment. The punishment also included that waiting time, knowing that was going to happen. And so I simply would not entertain the thought of what was going to happen. I was just there having fun, waiting outside the headmaster's office. And it was really clear to me that they were using fear to try to manipulate and control me. And there was no way I was going to buy it. And so if they were giving, they were only allowed to give 6 hits of a strap or cane. That was the limit back then. And I would always put my hand out if they were caning me on my hands for the 7th hit, which they weren't allowed to give, because there was no way known I was going to let them use fear to manipulate and control me. So at a very young age, I developed an attitude to fear that I wouldn't be ruled by it. I remember my first day at school, the headmaster gave me 6 across the backside. I was an uncontrollable child. Fortunately, I didn't grow out of that. So I'm here today. But if you let fear rule your life, you don't have a life. Fear has a life. You don't do anything. You stay safe. And the adventures happen on television for you while you're watching. They don't happen in your life because you serve fear. And fear is a terrible master. It'll have you not live. It'll have you stay safe. If you're willing to step through fear, you can have amazing adventures on this planet. You can say hello to a lot of people. Life is good. And so I advocate that people don't serve fear because it's the main obstacle in the way of higher consciousness. If you serve fear, you are lost. Step through fear, breathe out, let go, and do it anyway, whatever it is.
Is there such a thing as healthy fear, such as to protect oneself from dangerous activities or situations?
Yeah, yeah. When we're kids, we need fear. Absolutely. If we don't have fear as children, we will probably die. We'll step in front of a bus or jump into a pool at the wrong end or something when we haven't learned to swim yet. Fear is a protective instrument. It's just that as adults or even as teenagers, we know what is dangerous and we know what is not. So we don't need fear to protect us. We can actually be careful because we know the dangers. But unfortunately, fear doesn't go away as we become teenagers or adults. It stays there because it's a primal defense program, which is required for us when we're children to protect us. But as adults, we do not need to serve fear because we know what is dangerous. We know not to step in front of buses. We know not to go around corners too fast in cars or run red lights. We don't need fear to protect us. We know. So yeah, it's a natural part. There's nothing wrong with it. It's healthy, particularly as children. But in adults, it can become quite unhealthy, particularly if you decide to serve fear and let it be your master, because you'll play life be out of it. You'll be a voyeur instead of an adventurer.
Do you still experience fear, and what caused that?
I haven't experienced any fear for 21 years, since 1999. Awakening occurred in May 1999, and I have not experienced any fear whatsoever since then. So when danger appears, I'm cautious, but not because of fear, but because I know it's dangerous. And so I ride a motorcycle, and I know not to go around corners too fast. I know not to drive dangerously, not because of fear, but because I know. We don't need fear. You wake up, fear disappears. It's one of the aspects of enlightenment. It's beautiful not to have fear. Fearlessness. People think of fearlessness as being able to step through fear. No, fearlessness is having no fear. It's brilliant. It's called a baya, fearless, a baya. It's one of the aspects of enlightenment. It's a part of what I'd have to say is freedom, freedom from the mind, because the mind is a prison, the bars of which are made of fear. And in enlightenment, you're free of that. There is no fear anymore. There are no bars anymore. You're out.
Kalimba says, I have heard it said, feel the fear, but do it anyway.
Yeah, if fear's there, you can feel it. If it's not there, don't bother feeling it, Kalimba. Yeah, that's actually how I've lived my life, Kalimba. I've not allowed fear to, in any way, control or manipulate how I've wanted to be in the world. A lot of people are so frightened of abandonment, so frightened of rejection, that they sell out incredibly inside relationships just so they won't have to feel that pain, because they're frightened of it. They're frightened of being abandoned. They're frightened of being rejected. And so this is how codependence begins, where people are in relationships where they're being abused, but they stay in the relationship because they're so frightened to be rejected, so frightened to be abandoned, that they put up with all sorts of nonsense. This is in service of fear.
Frank asks, being open with unpleasant emotions, we can change the external situation to alleviate the emotion, or change our internal beliefs and expectations to alleviate the emotion. Do you recommend that we do not change our external situation?
Yeah, okay, so what I discovered a long time ago now, I discovered that my best teachers were the people that I didn't get along with. Uh, if we get along with someone, there's not a great deal of lessons in surrender or acceptance there. But if we are with people who we don't get along with, particularly partners where we have disagreements, it gives us an opportunity to have a look inside and see what it is that contracts, what it is that goes into resistance, what is it that's in the way, what are the obstacles that are showing up. It gives us a chance to surrender them. It gives us a chance to undo the belief systems that support them. And so moving away has not been one of the aspects of my life. If anything, I've been a stayer, because that's where we learn how to get free.
When a friend betrays me or tells lies about me behind my back, I avoid the situation because I don't want to feel the discomfort. What would be an open way of being in that situation?
Well, that seems to happen to me on a regular basis, and I just do nothing. That works well. I don't expect that people are going to be reasonable. I don't expect people to not betray. I don't expect people not to lie. Why would I? That's what people do. I'm in touch with reality. The reality is human beings do what human beings do. They do betray, they do lie, they do thieve, they do all these awful things. I'm okay with that. I'm not going to contract over that. I'm not going to create suffering in myself because of that. That's just how it is. That's the world we live in. I accept that.
It seems that it takes quite a lot of courage to be in a situation of betrayal and feel the discomfort of that. Would you say that is true?
Yeah. It's uncomfortable to feel any kind of wounding, and betrayal wounding is particularly nasty. But as adults, we can allow ourselves to feel it without running away from it or using a defense system like anger or something else to avoid it. We can allow ourselves to feel it. We just got to be willing, that's all. Takes courage, that's all. If you haven't got the courage, well, you won't do it. But if you want to heal the wounds of your heart, you have to be willing to feel. That's how we heal.
A viewer asks, what's the difference between staying with discomfort and staying with abuse? Are both okay?
Interesting question. I can only talk from my perspective. I can't talk about your perspective. From my perspective, I surrender.
Is openness related to personality, like being an extroverted or introverted person?
No, true openness is not introverted or extroverted. It's a lack of the I. It's a lack of the defense systems. It's walking through the world vulnerable. An extrovert can walk through the world seemingly open when not being open at all. They could be rafting on something. Someone who's truly open allows the world to pass through them without resistance. It's neither extrovert nor introvert. It's just open. You can't say a baby is extrovert or introvert. They're just open. Same.
Why are some people naturally more open than others?
You say naturally more open than others. I think closure is more natural than openness, actually. Have a look at it. Why are people closed? They're protecting themselves. They're trying to survive. That's natural. To be open is unnatural. You're risking yourself. You're putting yourself out there. You might not survive. Truly open people have done a lot of work to be open. Otherwise, they wouldn't be open. Of course, it does help if you're brought up in an environment that is loving and kind. You're likely to be more open than if you're brought up in an environment that is brutal and mean. That's so what? That's childhood. As an adult, we can open up. As an adult, we have the power. We can open up. We can allow ourselves to feel. We can dismantle our defense systems. What happened in childhood is irrelevant.
A viewer asks, are animals open? If so, are they in higher consciousness?
When animals are relaxed, they're open, and when they're on guard, they are not. How's that? We got three little dogs, and when they're really relaxed, they're open. When they're just laying around doing what dogs do, which is usually sleep 18 hours a day, they are wide open. But when they're out playing with each other, there's a certain level of closure. There's a certain level of on-guardness. The little wildness comes out in them. That's natural. For them to stay wide open while playing with each other, while feisting around, that just wouldn't happen, not really. Because they don't have the intelligence to undo all the defense systems that are required to stay open. Humans have that intelligence. That's why humans can go for higher consciousness. That's why humans can go for super consciousness. That's why humans can actually perceive love. Because they can remove the obstacles. It's because they're intelligent enough to.
Nadine asks, so if someone was about to hit you, would you stand and let them?
Maybe. I don't know. We have to try it one day and see. It's very hard for me to say with that particular thing because I did 15 years of martial arts training and that's all automated inside me. The same as walking's automated, the same as talking's automated. Riding a push bike's automated. It's all automatic. You do 15 years of full contact martial arts and a lot of defense systems around not being hit are automated. It's possible there could be a defense, but it's also possible there might not. I don't know. We'd have to find out.
Do people ever find your openness to be frightening because they're so used to meeting people who are closed?
In my lifetime, people have found me to be intense because I'm very present and always have been. And whenever you're around someone who's very present, there's a certain intensity. They don't have the soft edges that someone who's dreaming has. And so it's not that comfortable to be around people who are really present because they have sharp edges. They have an intensity with them. So, and as we become more present, we tend to be a bit like that. We've left the dream world and we're in the real world now.
I have found that open people seem more attractive. Why is that?
Well, who would you rather go out with? Someone who's dreaming or someone who's present to you, with you? Really? Who would you rather hang out with? Someone who's present with what you're doing, what you're saying, or someone who's just dreaming in their own little world? It's much nicer to be with people who are present than dreamboats who aren't even with you. The whole idea of Tantra, in a lot of ways, is to be absolutely 100% present to whatever is. And it's brilliant being present. It's not brilliant being with someone who's dreaming at you. What would you prefer?
I find sometimes I'll be buoyant and open, but then it seems that I'm just rafting, because when I'm under pressure for a long period of time, I get quite contracted. How can I know if I'm truly open or just rafting?
Find yourself a teacher who can tell you. Unfortunately, the mind is very good at bulldusting itself. Find someone who's further ahead who can see you, who's willing to tell you. That's what I did. I started when I was 19. I got together with people who were further ahead. They were teachers who could see me and who were willing to show me what they could see. And I found that absolutely invaluable, to be around people who are further ahead, who are willing to tell me what they could see about me. Because like everybody else, my mind was a bull duster. It would mitigate its responsibilities. It would change the stories to suit its opinion. And so I had good teachers. They were strong teachers. I wasn't interested in teachers who just told me how lovely I was. I was interested in those who could see me and who were willing to tell me the truth.
A viewer asks, is it better to be with open people to enjoy or closed people to practice openness?
I love people, full stop. It doesn't matter whether they're closed or open. I love people. If you're in the world and you're with people, you can practice openness, because there's lots of people out there that will have differing understandings and opinions than you as to what they're doing. Some of their behaviours won't be as enjoyable to you as they are to them. It gives you an opportunity. The more in the world you are, the more opportunity you have to practice openness, because the more opportunities you're going to get to find contraction in yourself. Up to you. I see openness as a spiritual practice, because it takes you to higher consciousness. I see openness as a way of the heart, because it facilitates the perception of heart. And nobody needs to know you're practicing it. It's brilliant. You can do it all day long. You can do it in the marketplace and no one needs to know. Or you can practice closure, which is what most people do. And they stay in lower consciousness as a result.
Next, Arun would like to ask a question.
Hi, Arun.
Hello. Yeah, sorry again. I got my phone died yesterday when I was in the middle of asking you my question.
Geez, I'm glad it wasn't a patient.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, me too. A lot of paperwork for that one.
A lot of paperwork for that one, right?
That's what they say in the hospitals anyway. We don't want people dying because it's too much paperwork.
Right. Well, it encourages you as a doctor to make sure they survive. That's very noble of you, Arun.
I was hoping I could continue my question from yesterday. So I was asking you, when awareness turns on itself through self-inquiry and then the mind contracts, I come out of that stillness. And I was saying to you that, or I was asking you, what's the best way to prepare the mind to not contract? And you were suggesting to me that I should surrender, and I was asking you if I could use my mind to solve the problem, basically.
Yeah. And that just takes you into another dream of problem solving. And that's actually how we were all trained at school to problem solve. The problem with that is it takes us into another dream. And so a lot of people who get into higher consciousness or spiritual growth get into analyzing their mind, thinking that somehow in analyzing their mind they're getting somewhere, but not realizing that they're just going deeper into another dream, which is analyzing. And so from my perspective, once I saw this, because I was like that too, I recognized that we have to keep it very, very simple and use as little mind and as little words as possible if we're going to engage.
Okay.
Sort of you start analyzing your mind and you're having what you think is a profitable dream. But that's all it is a dream, and it keeps you away from higher consciousness.
Yeah, that hit home. Yeah, so it currently feels like a profitable dream when I can use my mind to try and analyze my mind, because I feel
That's
like I'm making progress.
that's right. It looks that way, but it's not that way.
Mm. And so the
Go ahead. Go ahead.
so the suggestion then is just to not go, because yesterday you were saying that I need to shoot my mind at dawn. So essentially just to not even go down the path of trying to use the mind and instead choose the path of surrender.
I said to shoot your mind slowly at dawn.
Yes.
Yeah, well, just practice letting go, letting go, letting go. Like the thing that the last vestige of the ego before enlightenment is helper thoughts. Those little thoughts that measure everything, that tell you how well you're doing or how badly you're doing. They have to go too. They're in the way too. Everything has to be surrendered.
Yeah. Okay. So, oh, sorry, you go. You're about to say something.
No?
Okay. Well, what I was going to ask you was, so here's a thought that I've had consecutively over the last 2 weeks. So when I've played hockey over the last 2 weeks, both weeks I've had terrible games, and so I always get angry with myself when I don't play really well because I'm used to playing moderately well at least. And so one thing that I've been doing to get to the root of this angry thought is I'm not really my body, and my body didn't play well today, but the I is not affected by this, it's just the body that didn't play well. And that is, to me, feels like using my mind to try and address this thought of anger. And it's worked reasonably well, because then I go, well, not really my body, so it doesn't really matter if I don't play well.
Won't work.
Okay.
Look at it. Well, first of all, you and I were trained the same way. We were trained to be winners. Unfortunately, that means end gaming. So rather than enjoying the game, we're always trying to end game by winning. And really, if we look at sport, if we can just enjoy the game rather than be concerned about the result, we can have a very beautiful game. But as long as we're end gaming and we're not winning or we don't win, we've got a serious problem, which we're creating through our own attitude. And
Yeah.
so I played rugby till I was 28, and at least the last 5 to 6 years of it, I didn't play to win, though I tried to win. I played for the game. And I really enjoyed that part of rugby where I actually just was playing for the game, just the thrill of being on with 14 other guys, because I was playing union,
Okay.
and playing the game. And if we won, that's good. If we didn't win, equally good, because the other side won. We were programmed to win at the cost of other people, which actually, when you look at it, is against our own hearts.
Yeah.
You see, if I play any game nowadays, everybody has to win. I'm not interested in creating losers because of my winning. That's against my heart. And so what I'm saying is you are programmed to win at the cost of your own happiness. Because when you get angry, you make you unhappy. And that's end gaming. It's just end gaming. And that's how we were programmed. And it's awful when you really step back and look at it, because we weren't programmed to be happy. We were programmed to win at any cost.
Yeah.
Because you're turning violence onto yourself when you're being angry. So you're beating yourself up with anger. Man, we were programmed badly.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. And what you're essentially saying is that is essentially just surrender by not focusing on winning
You
and
also
just
have to have an understanding why you want to surrender. And so when I talk about endgaming in sport, you need to have an understanding that winning is actually the striving for winning, the ambition for winning in itself is massive dissatisfaction. It's a form of suffering that we create in ourselves because of the way we've been programmed.
yeah.
And so if you approach hockey with the idea, I'm here to play the game and I'll celebrate whoever wins, you're going to have a much better game.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And so yeah. Okay. stuff that I'll stop there. Thank you.
You should really contemplate what I've said today, because I know that you've been programmed to be a winner,
Yeah.
but and it will make you a winner, but it's detrimental to the happiness in your life.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I find when I play sport, I usually don't care. Like I'm never really look at the scoreboard. I don't mind who wins, whether our team wins or loses, but I get annoyed when I don't fulfill what I feel is my potential on any given day. And then I get annoyed with myself because I think, oh, I could have done better than that.
So you're competing with yourself. Wow. Look at that, man. It's just you hurting you. For what?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's why, like one line of questioning to apply to was that I read that I could use when I get these thoughts that I have identified as well as not being useful to me is, if they're all, I don't know whether they're spiritual questions or pseudo-spiritual questions or what they are, but like I ask myself the question, on whose behalf does this thought of self-hatred arise when I'm not playing well? And then, it says if you follow that, the answer to that is almost like a self-inquiry question, and you can never answer it and arrive at the true you, because you'll just say the self-hatred is towards the body or the mind, and so eventually you will just have to realize that you let it go. But from what you're saying, and my understanding is that's also just me using more mind, and it's just going to take me down a rabbit hole that I probably don't want to go down.
That's exactly right. You're gonna get lost in it.
Yeah,
And here, Rune, no matter what, you have to find a way to be okay with you, no matter what you do. Because you have to be your own friend. If you're not your own friend, you can't ever relax enough to support higher consciousness.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting that you've said all this, because I remember probably 3 weeks ago I asked you, when thoughts come up, what do I do with thoughts? Because I was just essentially just meditating and thoughts would come up, and I asked you about how Ramana said, thoughts, if you just leave them alone, will go away, and you said that that is probably the case for someone who's willing to just kind of renounce themselves from the world. But in the marketplace, it's much harder to do that, and that's certainly been my experience. I can't just, if I just go back to the breath in that moment in time, that angry thought will go away, or if I go back to my footsteps or something like that. But the thought itself, the thought pattern, the habitual thought pattern doesn't go away. It's still there.
It has to be undone. It has to be seen through and removed.
Yeah.
You have to challenge the belief system that's supporting it.
But, even for example, yesterday you were saying the mind is essentially a bullshit. Forgive me if I've said it wrong. So in some ways, when you say that, I think to myself, well, why do I even need to address it at its root core? But then
I consider my mind affectionately a bullshitter,
okay.
because you must remain the best friend of your mind. You can't have one part of your mind judging another part of your mind and holding it in contempt and think that somehow that's going to support higher consciousness. That supports lower consciousness. You
Yeah.
have to be okay with whatever you find. So I say, I
Okay.
my mind is affectionately a bullshitter.
Right.
You see, there's a
Yeah.
gentle, there's a hold in that.
And in saying that, you were saying that for me, in the seeker's position, I need to affectionately still take my whole, like, look into my mind, essentially. I can't just, because my mind is a bullshit, I can't just ignore it or leave it alone.
Well, you become a scientist of it. And scientists study things from doubt. They don't study things from faith.
Mm.
So you start doubting your own mind, and because you're throwing doubt into the mix, you'll start to see more clearly what it's up to,
Mm.
because you're not just believing it.
So when you just witness thoughts as they come up, some of the teachings that I've read tell you not to do anything when you're witnessing, just to watch it come up and then not interfere with it, analyze it, apply any logic to it. Is that
You just
this? Yeah, sorry, you were about to say something.
Yeah, you just observe, that's right. But afterwards, then
Yeah.
you can say, then you can have a look at what might need to be done or not done with that particular, what you've seen, but later.
Right. Okay. Okay. And when you say what needs to be done or not done, how does that fit into the paradigm of just surrendering? Because doing or not doing is trying to change the thought in a way, right? Versus surrender is just saying, I don't.
You can surrender as much as you like, but if you haven't undone the belief systems that create contraction in you, they're going to keeping contracting in you. You know, if the mind has got an obstacle in it, it needs to be dealt with. Surrender is not going to deal with that obstacle because it'll be a default program of some kind.
Okay. And I guess from what you're saying, if it's a default program that's obviously not serving me, then the way to um, address it is to just cast doubt to it, right? Because whatever the program is, it's not serving me. So there must be doubt to make it undone.
Well, as soon as we throw doubt into any belief system, the belief system loses its power.
Yeah. So did you have questions that you asked yourself to undo, to cast doubt and undo? Like, should I say to myself, when
Yeah.
I look at these things, like, why, how could this not be true? Or why is this not true? Or
The first question is it true? That's
is
the
it,
first question. Is it true? And the second question is it true in the big picture of everything, in God's big picture? And
yeah,
that is the answer. I don't know.
yeah,
How can I? All of a sudden now you have doubt.
yeah. And then so then where does surrender loop into that?
Well, once you have doubt in a belief system, it's lost its power.
You just let go.
So surrender is something that you do all the time. You look at how we practice surrender, because surrender is actually a non-doing. And you don't do a non-doing. A non-doing is a non-doing. But how you get to a non-doing is by practicing acceptance of what is.
Yeah, yeah,
And that is a doing. The practice of acceptance is a doing. But what it leaves us with eventually is surrender.
yeah. Okay.
So someone who's surrendered has practiced a great deal of acceptance. Otherwise, they wouldn't be surrendered.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. That was really useful. I have one more very quick question. It's about when I come to it was just something you said in yesterday's call when I listened back to it about calling off the search in relation to when when we come to satsang with you. What's the best way to be there with you to get the most benefit out of it? Is it to ask a self-inquiry question and try to be awareness and just let awareness stick to itself, or is it to watch the breath, or what do you say?
The best way to be with any satsang teacher is to engage them. Because when they engage them, they are directing energy directly at you. And that energy is high frequency energy. Because when we really look at higher consciousness, it's all about frequency of energy. And
Yeah,
when you engage someone who has high frequency energy, you're engaging truth. You're engaging your own true nature. So the best way to be with someone who's awake is to engage them. And in that engagement, there will be a transmission.
all right. So speaking
Yeah.
to okay, yes,
Hello, Arun.
yes. So that's why you say, even if you don't have a question, ask any question, just so that you can get that direct engagement. Is that right? As opposed to just
So
sitting
when I
quiet.
used to with teachers, so the Advaita Vedanta teachers, I was the guy in the room who was always up the front with my hand up. I was always the guy engaging them because I knew that the energy transmission that was occurring was actually blowing my mind and undoing things and emptying things out. Because in a lot of ways, the whole thing about satsang is energy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. Well, that sounds good. I may ask some pointless questions, but I will ask a question.
Good for you.
Thanks so much for your time.
Nice talking to you, Arun.
You too. Thanks, Fish.
We have a couple of pre-submitted questions. The first one is, what is the role of Kundalini on the path to self-realization? Is it necessary?
I don't really get into it because it tends to be a bit of a trap. Um, I- I've chosen different ways of teaching, and one of them isn't the yogic path really. I teach openness, I teach meditation, I teach self-inquiry as a way to higher consciousness. I'm not really big on the chakras or that sort of thing because the mind can get too interested in it. It's too easy to get trapped in the interest, the curiosity. But the best thing that you can ever do that the mind or the ego cannot use for its own benefit is the practice of openness. And nobody needs to know you're doing it. You can do it in the marketplace and you can do it all the time. And it diminishes the I and raises your consciousness levels, opens you up to the perception of love. It's the best.
And the second question is, how should a householder treat sex within a relationship?
Oh, that has nothing to do with what I've been talking about today, really, has it? No. Uh, how should a householder treat sex within a relationship? Gently. Be very gentle with the sex. I'm sorry, the question's silly.
When I get contracted about something that someone else's actions or behavior, is it because it triggers something within me that I do not accept?
Not necessarily. Can be, but not necessarily. Look, if someone's actions or behaviours contracts you, forget about them. Have a look at what's happening inside of you. What's caused the contraction inside of you? And don't blame them. Have a look at your belief systems. Have a look at what makes your mind tick. See what's in the way. It won't be them, it's you. It's how you think. Undo your mind and be free. Undo the belief systems that cause contraction in you and be free. Forget about what's happening out there. What's happening in you? You're creating your reality, not the world. The world doesn't create your reality. You're responsible for it. You're creating your reality. Undo you. Undo the things that create contraction in you. Take away the belief systems that cause contraction. Practice acceptance. This is best. You can go to war for your whole life against the world, and you might be right, but you end up losing because you stay in lower consciousness and suffer until you die. It's not about being right, and it's not about being wrong. It's about being open. The more open you can be, the better it is for you in higher consciousness. The better it is for you in the perceiving love. And the better it is for you in healing the wounds of your heart. Openness really rocks. Thank you for satsang. Good to see you brave hearts here today.